My daughter Vanessa looked me straight in the eye and said, "Mom's completely lost her mind. She's just some crazy old woman now." I smiled, walked away, and the first thing I did was transfer $2 million out of the trust fund I'd been secretly building for her future. 3 hours later, 17 frantic calls. The same girl who'd been calling me delusional was suddenly desperate to know why her credit cards were declining and her apartment lease was being terminated. But by then, I had a completely different plan brewing. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I balanced the fresh orchids against my hip and pressed the doorbell of the luxury high-rise apartment building. My heart hammered the way it used to when Vanessa was small, and I'd surprise her at dance recitals. Except this time, I wasn't surprising anyone. I'd texted yesterday, told her I wanted to bring lunch and catch up, and she'd replied with a single word, "Fine." The concierge recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Crawford, so good to see you again. Miss Vanessa is expecting you." His smile was warm, genuine. At least someone in this building still treated me with respect. The elevator hummed quietly as it climbed to the 32nd floor. I stared at my reflection in the polished doors, smoothing down my simple navy cardigan. 63 years old, silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, reading glasses hanging from a chain around my neck. I looked exactly like what I was, a retired teacher from suburban Phoenix. What I didn't look like was a woman sitting on a $40 million investment portfolio. The elevator dinged softly, and I stepped into the hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than most people's cars. Apartment 3207 stood at the end, sleek black door with brushed silver numbers. I knocked gently. "It's open," Vanessa's voice called from inside, sharp and impatient. I pushed the door open and stepped into what looked like a magazine spread. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the Phoenix skyline, white leather furniture arranged with mathematical precision, and not a single item out of place. The apartment gleamed like a showroom, cold and perfect. "Vanessa, honey?" I called out, setting the orchids on the marble kitchen island. "In here," she replied from somewhere deeper in the apartment. I followed her voice to the master bedroom, where I found my daughter standing in front of a wall-sized mirror, trying on what looked like her 10th outfit of the day. Designer clothes were scattered across the king-sized bed like colorful confetti. She barely glanced at me when I entered. "These jeans make me look fat," she announced, turning sideways to examine herself. "Everything makes me look fat lately." "It's probably stress." I perched on the edge of her bed, moving aside a silk blouse that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Stress about what, sweetheart?" She finally looked at me, and I saw something I hadn't noticed before. Dark circles under her eyes, despite the carefully applied concealer. Her usually perfect blonde highlights showing roots. She looked tired in a way that expensive clothes couldn't hide. "Just work stuff," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "You wouldn't understand." The casual dismissal stung, but I pushed it aside. "Try me. I might be more understanding than you think." Vanessa pulled off the jeans and reached for another pair, this time in black. "Mom, no offense, but you taught kindergarten for 30 years. The most stressful thing you dealt with was finger paint stains and naptime tantrums." I felt my smile falter slightly. "Well, maybe, but I'm a good listener." "It's just complicated," she continued, not looking at me as she struggled with the zipper. "Brandon's been weird lately, distant, and work is insane. My boss is writing me about the Henderson account, and I swear if I lose another client, I might actually lose my job. Brandon, her boyfriend of 2 years, a hedge fund manager with perfect teeth and a personality to match his portfolio, aggressive and shallow. I'd never liked him, but I'd kept my opinions to myself." "Have you talked to Brandon about what's bothering you?" I asked gently. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Right. Brandon doesn't do emotional conversations. He barely does conversations at all anymore. Last week, I tried to tell him about my presentation disaster, and he literally put in his AirPods while I was talking." My chest tightened. My daughter was clearly struggling, and the people in her life were failing her. "Honey, maybe you need to surround yourself with people who actually care about your feelings." Vanessa finally turned to look at me, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the little girl she used to be. Vulnerable, seeking comfort. Then her expression hardened. People who care about my feelings. Mom, this is the real world. Not everyone gets to coast through life teaching kids their ABCs and going to bed at 9 o'clock. Some of us have actual pressure, actual responsibilities. The words hit like a slap. I kept my voice steady. I understand there's pressure, Vanessa. I just think… You think what? She cut me off, yanking the black jeans up and turning back to the mirror. That I should quit my job and move back to some tiny apartment and clip coupons like it's 1985? I never said that. You don't have to say it. It's written all over your face every time you come here. You think my life is shallow. You think I'm spoiled. She whirled around, eyes flashing. Well, guess what? I earned this. I worked my ass off to get here, and I'm not apologizing for wanting nice things. I stood up slowly, my heart breaking a little more with each word. I don't think you're spoiled, sweetheart. I'm proud of what you've accomplished. I just worry that you're not happy. Not happy? Vanessa's voice rose. I have a corner office at one of the top marketing firms in the city. I drive a BMW. I live in a penthouse. I date a successful man. What exactly about my life suggests I'm not happy? The fact that you're stress-eating antacids and haven't smiled once since I got here, I said quietly. For a moment, silence stretched between us. Then Vanessa's face crumpled slightly, and I thought maybe I'd gotten through to her. Maybe she'd let me help, let me be her mother again. Instead, she straightened her shoulders, and her expression went cold. You know what your problem is, Mom? You never had any real ambition. You were content to settle for mediocre your whole life, and now you can't stand that I wanted more. The accusation hung in the air like poison. I felt my throat close up, but I forced myself to speak calmly. Vanessa, that's not fair. Isn't it? She grabbed a designer blazer from the bed and shrugged it on. You married Dad right out of college, had me a year later, and then spent the next 30 years in the same job, in the same house, with the same boring routine. You never took any risks. You never dreamed big. And now you want to drag me down to your level. Each word was a knife twist. I thought about all the dreams I'd put aside when I got pregnant with her at 22. The graduate degree I'd planned to pursue, the novel I'd started writing, the travel I'd postponed indefinitely. I'd made those sacrifices gladly, because being her mother was the most important thing I'd ever done. I made choices based on what was best for our family, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Our family? Vanessa laughed harshly. Mom. Dad left when I was 15. He couldn't stand the boring life either. Face it, you were never enough for him, and your small-town mentality isn't enough for me either. The words hit like a physical blow. My ex-husband Richard had indeed left, but not because I was boring. He'd left because he'd been having an affair with his dental hygienist for 3 years, and I'd finally found out. I'd never told Vanessa the truth, wanting to protect her relationship with her father. Now I wondered if that had been a mistake. Vanessa, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. She was putting on jewelry now, expensive pieces that caught the light from the massive windows. You're jealous. You see what I've built, and it reminds you of…
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
Everything you never had the courage to go after. I felt tears threatening and blinked them back. That's not true. Isn't it? She turned to face me fully, arms crossed. Every time you come here, you have this look on your face. This judgmental, disapproving look. Like you think I've sold my soul or something. I've never judged you. Please. She cut me off with a wave of her hand. You don't have to say it out loud. It's obvious. You think I'm superficial. You think my job is meaningless. You probably think Brandon is an asshole. Well, she wasn't wrong about Brandon, but I wasn't about to say that now. I think you're my daughter, and I love you, I said simply. I want you to be happy, whatever that looks like. Vanessa's expression softened for just a moment, and I thought maybe we were getting somewhere. Then her phone buzzed on the nightstand, and she grabbed it immediately. Shit, she muttered, scrolling through what looked like work emails. I have to go. Crisis at the office. But I brought lunch, I said weakly. I thought we could talk. Can't. She was already moving toward the door, grabbing her purse and keys. Maybe next time. Next time. When would that be? It had been 3 months since our last real conversation, and that one had ended similarly. Vanessa, wait. I followed her to the front door. Can we please just... Mom, I really don't have time for this right now. She paused with her hand on the doorknob. Look, I appreciate that you want to help, but honestly, your advice isn't really relevant to my life anymore. The dismissal was so casual, so cutting, that I actually took a step back. What I mean is, she continued, not seeming to notice my reaction, you lived in a different world. A simpler world. The challenges I'm facing, the pressure I'm under, the level I'm operating at, it's just not something you can relate to. I stared at my daughter, this beautiful, successful woman who I'd raised almost entirely on my own, and realized I was looking at a stranger. I see, I said quietly. Do you? She tilted her head, studying me like I was a mildly interesting specimen. Because sometimes I think you still see me as your little girl who needs mommy to fix everything. But I'm not that person anymore. I'm a grown woman with a grown-up life, and I need to handle my problems on my own. Even when those problems are making you miserable? I'm not miserable, she snapped. I'm stressed. There's a difference. And stress is part of success. Something you'd understand if you'd ever actually pushed yourself beyond your comfort zone. The cruelty of it took my breath away. This was my daughter, the little girl I'd held through nightmares, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose heart I'd mended through her first breakup. The child I'd worked 2 jobs to put through college so she wouldn't graduate with debt. I should go, I said, my voice steady, despite the storm raging inside me. Probably for the best, Vanessa agreed, already pulling out her phone to check more messages. Things are crazy right now. Maybe we can catch up when life calms down a bit. When life calms down. As if her life was some temporary hurricane that would eventually pass, rather than the result of choices she'd made and continued to make. I walked toward the elevator in a daze, my daughter's words echoing in my head. Never had any real ambition. Content to settle for mediocre. Small-town mentality. The accusations felt so unfair, so wrong, but they'd been delivered with such conviction that part of me wondered if they were true. The elevator ride down felt endless. When the doors finally opened in the lobby, I managed to smile and nod at the concierge, but I could feel my composure cracking. I made it to my car before the tears came. Sitting in the parking garage of my daughter's luxury building, I sobbed for the relationship we'd lost, for the little girl who used to think I hung the moon, for the woman who now saw me as nothing more than an embarrassment. My phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. Thanks for stopping by. Sorry I was rushed. Work is insane right now. No acknowledgement of what she'd said. No apology for the cruelty of her words. Just a casual brush-off, like our conversation had been about the weather. I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. For the first time in my life, I had nothing to say to my daughter. The drive home to Scottsdale took 45 minutes, but it felt like hours. I kept replaying the conversation, searching for signs I'd missed, moments where I could have said something different. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this hadn't been an isolated incident. It had been building for years. The subtle condescension when I'd ask about her job. The way she'd changed the subject whenever I mentioned visiting. The Christmas last year when she'd spent exactly 3 hours at my house before claiming she had plans with Brandon's family. Plans that apparently didn't include me. When had I become the embarrassing mother she tolerated, rather than the woman who'd raised her? I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment, looking at my modest ranch-style house. It wasn't a penthouse, but it was paid for. The garden was thriving, the paint was fresh, and every room held memories of raising Vanessa. This had been our sanctuary when it was just the two of us after Richard left. Now it felt lonely. Inside, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table where Vanessa used to do her homework. I'd helped her with algebra at this table. We'd planned her quinceañera here. I'd held her while she cried about her first heartbreak in this very spot. When had she started seeing me as a failure instead of the woman who'd sacrificed everything to give her the best life possible? My phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. For a moment, hope fluttered in my chest. Maybe Vanessa was calling to apologize. Maybe she'd realized how hurtful her words had been, but the caller ID showed my sister Maria's name instead. Patsy? You sound terrible, what's wrong? I hadn't realized how my voice would give me away, but Maria had always been able to read me like a book. I just came from Vanessa's place, I said, my voice thick. And I told her everything. Every cruel word, every dismissive gesture, every moment that had felt like a small death. Maria listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. She'd always been the practical one, the one who saw things clearly. That little bitch, Maria said when I finished. Maria? No, Patsy, I'm serious. After everything you did for her? After you worked yourself into the ground to pay for her college to make sure she had every opportunity? And this is how she talks to you? I sighed. She's under a lot of pressure. Don't you dare make excuses for her. Maria's voice was sharp. Pressure doesn't give someone the right to treat their mother like garbage. Especially not the mother who gave up everything for them. I didn't give up everything. Didn't you? Maria's voice softened. Patsy, you were accepted to graduate school at ASU. You had a fellowship. You were going to get your master's in psychology, maybe even your doctorate. You gave that up when Richard left because you thought Vanessa needed stability. I remembered. The acceptance letter had come just 2 weeks after Richard walked out. I'd stared at it for hours, imagining the life I could build, the career I could have. But Vanessa had been so fragile, so broken by her father's abandonment. She'd needed me. She was just 15, Maria. She was already struggling with her dad leaving. I couldn't disrupt her life even more. So you disrupted your own instead. The truth of it sat heavy in the room. I had disrupted my own life. Multiple times. For Vanessa's sake. Do you regret it? Maria asked gently. I considered the question. Did I regret choosing my daughter over my dreams? Did I regret the sacrifices that had shaped both our lives? No, I said finally. I don't regret it. I just wish she understood what it cost. Maybe it's time she learned. Something in Maria's tone made me sit up straighter. What do you mean? I mean, maybe it's time Vanessa discovered that her boring mother with her small-town mentality isn't quite what she thinks. I frowned. I don't understand. Maria was quiet for a moment. Then, Patsy, when's the last time you checked your investment account? The question seemed to come out of nowhere. I don't know. A few months ago, maybe. Why? Check it. Maria, what does my investment account have to do with? Just check it. I'll hold. Confused, but curious, I opened my laptop and logged into my brokerage account. The page loaded slowly, and when the numbers appeared, I had to blink several times to make sure I was reading them correctly. Maria, I whispered. What do you see? This can't be right. My voice was barely audible. It says I have $47 million. 47.2, actually, as of market close yesterday. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. How is this possible? Remember Dad's old mining stock? The one he left us when he died? The company that everyone said was worthless? I did remember. Our father had been a stubborn optimist who'd invested in a small copper mining operation in rural Nevada. When he died 8 years ago, Maria and I had each inherited shares in what seemed like a defunct company. I'd forgotten about them entirely. Patsy, that worthless company just got bought out by a major mining conglomerate. Our shares were worth pennies for years, but the buyout... Maria's voice was filled with something between awe and amusement. Well, you're looking at the results. I scrolled through the account details. seeing transaction after transaction, the value climbing higher and higher over the past few months. Somehow, my simple investment account had been automatically reinvesting dividends and stock splits, and the recent buyout had created a fortune I'd never imagined possible. "There's more," Maria continued. "Remember Mom's life insurance policy? The one that was supposed to pay out $20,000 when she died? Our mother had passed away 5 years ago, and the insurance payout had been deposited directly into an account I rarely checked. I'd assumed it was just sitting there, slowly losing value to inflation. Turns out Mom was shrewder than we thought. That policy was actually invested in an index fund that's been compounding for the past 30 years. With the life insurance benefit and the growth." Maria paused. "Patsy, you're not just a millionaire, you're one of the wealthiest people in Arizona." I stared at the screen, my mind reeling. Numbers that seemed impossible. Account balances that looked like phone numbers. All this time, while I'd been clipping coupons and worrying about car repairs, I'd been sitting on a fortune. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. "Because I just found out myself when I got my statements last week. And honestly, I wanted to see what you'd do with the information." I was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. Then a thought occurred to me. "Maria, Vanessa doesn't know about any of this, does she?" "How could she? You didn't even know." A strange feeling was building in my chest. Not quite anger, not quite satisfaction, but something in between. Something that felt like power. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said slowly. "What?" "She called me mediocre. Said I never had any ambition, never took any risks." I scrolled through more account details, seeing investments and portfolio allocations that painted a picture of steady, intelligent wealth building over decades. She thinks I'm just some boring old teacher who never accomplished anything. And now? I thought about Vanessa's expensive apartment, her designer clothes, her BMW that she was probably still making payments on. All the things she was so proud of, all the markers of success she used to measure her worth against mine. Now I'm worth more than she'll probably earn in her entire lifetime. So what are you going to do about it? That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do with this information, with this power? "I don't know yet," I said honestly, "but I have a feeling I'm about to find out." After Maria and I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at the laptop screen that creatingly, numbers didn't change, didn't disappear, like some cruel mirage. They were real. I was real. This new version of myself, this woman with resources I'd never imagined, was real. For 30 years, I'd defined myself by my limitations. The single mother stretching every dollar. The teacher living paycheck to paycheck. The woman who'd sacrificed her dreams for her daughter's future. I'd worn that identity like a hair shirt, proof of my dedication, but also evidence of my failure to reach for more. But that woman had been an illusion. Or maybe not an illusion, but an incomplete picture. Because while I'd been focused on scarcity, on making do with less, my modest investments had been quietly growing into something extraordinary. I thought about Vanessa's words again. Content to settle for mediocre, never had any real ambition. The accusations stung less now, but they still revealed something important about how my daughter saw me. How she'd chosen to see me. The woman she'd described didn't exist. Had never existed. But she didn't know that. A slow smile spread across my face as an idea began to form. My daughter thought she understood the world. Thought she understood success and failure. Thought she understood me. Maybe it was time to get an education. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Vanessa's contact information. For a moment, I considered calling her, telling her everything, sharing this incredible news. We could celebrate together, we could plan together. Maybe this windfall could heal the rift between us. Then I remembered her words. "Your advice isn't really relevant to my life anymore. The challenges I'm facing are just not something you can relate to." I put the phone down without making the call. Instead, I opened a new browser window and began researching. Investment advisors. Wealth management. Estate planning. If I was going to be wealthy, I was going to do it right. I was going to learn everything I needed to know to manage this fortune responsibly. As I worked, another idea began to take shape. Something that made me smile in a way I hadn't smiled in years. Vanessa thought she understood the game of money and success. She thought she was winning, but she was playing checkers while I'd apparently been playing chess all along. It was time to make my next move. The sun was setting outside my kitchen window, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was the same sunset I'd watched thousands of times from this same spot, but somehow it looked different now. Brighter. More full of possibility. Tomorrow, I decided, I would start making some changes. But tonight, I would sit with this new reality, this new version of myself. The woman my daughter thought she knew so well was about to surprise her in ways she couldn't imagine. I poured myself a glass of wine, not the cheap stuff I usually bought, but the good bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. I raised it in a toast to my empty kitchen. "Here's to new beginnings," I said aloud, "and to daughters who have no idea what they've unleashed." The wine tasted like freedom. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The weight of yesterday's revelations sat differently now, not as a burden, but as an opportunity. I made my coffee in the same chipped mug I'd been using for a decade, but as I sipped it, I was already planning how this day would be different from every day that had come before. My first call was to Harrison & Associates, the premier wealth management firm in Scottsdale. I'd seen their advertisements in the Arizona Republic for years, always assuming their services were for people unlike me. People who inherited oil fortunes or built tech empires. Not retired kindergarten teachers from modest backgrounds. "Harrison & Associates, this is Jennifer. How may I help you?" "I'd like to schedule a consultation with one of your advisors," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Certainly. What's the nature of your inquiry?" I paused, still getting used to the reality of my situation. I need guidance on managing a substantial portfolio. Around $47 million. The brief silence on the other end was telling. "I see. Let me connect you with Mr. Harrison directly. Would you be available for a meeting this afternoon?" Within 3 hours, I was sitting in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the desert mountains, facing Robert Harrison himself. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-40s, with the kind of confident bearing that came from handling other people's fortunes for a living. "Mrs. Crawford, I have to admit, when Jennifer told me about your call, I was intrigued. It's not often we get new clients with your level of assets who aren't already working with a major firm." I explained the situation, the unexpected inheritance, the years of unknowing wealth accumulation. Harrison listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a leather portfolio. "Fascinating," he said when I finished. "And you had no idea the mining stocks had appreciated to this degree?" "None whatsoever. I honestly forgot I owned them." He smiled. "Sometimes the best investment strategy is benign neglect. Your father appears to have chosen his investments wisely, and your mother's insurance policy was brilliantly structured. The automatic reinvestment of dividends created a compounding effect that most people spend their entire careers trying to achieve." We spent the next 2 hours going through my complete financial picture. It was even better than I'd initially thought. The mining stocks were just part of it. There were bonds that had matured and been automatically reinvested, dividend-paying stocks that had split multiple times, and growth funds that had been quietly accumulating value for decades. "Mrs. Crawford, with proper management, this portfolio could easily support an annual income of $2 to $3 million without touching the principal. You could live very comfortably for the rest of your life and still leave a substantial legacy." Legacy, the word hung in the air between us. I thought about Vanessa, about the trust fund I'd been secretly building for her future, money she didn't know existed, set aside by a mother she now considered irrelevant. "I'd like to make some changes to my estate planning," I said carefully. "Of course. What did you have in mind?" I'd been thinking about this since yesterday evening, turning the idea over in my mind like a stone I was polishing smooth. "I have a daughter. She's currently the sole beneficiary of my will. I'd like to modify that arrangement." Harrison's expression remained professionally neutral. "Certainly. How would you like to restructure the inheritance?" "I want to establish a charitable foundation, something focused on education, supporting teachers, and underserved students. I'd like the foundation to receive the majority of my assets upon my death. And your daughter? I considered the question. Part of me wanted to cut her out entirely after yesterday's cruelty. But that would make me as vindictive as she'd been dismissive. She can have enough to pay off her student loans and put a down payment on a house, maybe $500,000. From $47 million to $500,000. It was still more money than most people saw in a lifetime, but it was a fraction of what she might have inherited if she'd treated me with basic respect. That's quite a significant change, Harrison observed. Are you certain you want to make such a dramatic adjustment? I've never been more certain of anything in my life. We spent another hour working out the details. Harrison recommended attorneys who specialized in estate planning and charitable foundations. He suggested investment strategies that would maximize the foundation's future impact. By the time I left his office, I had a comprehensive plan for transforming my unexpected wealth into something meaningful. But that was just the beginning. My next stop was the BMW dealership where Vanessa had bought her car. I remembered her excitement when she'd gotten approved for the lease. How proud she'd been to drive something that announced her success to the world. The monthly payments were substantial enough that she'd mentioned them several times, always in the context of how much she was willing to sacrifice for quality. I'm interested in purchasing a vehicle, I told the sales manager, a polished man named Derek who looked like he ate protein powder for breakfast. Excellent. What kind of driving do you do? Daily commuting? Weekend trips? Just around town mostly. But I want something that makes a statement. Derek's eyes lit up. He probably thought he was dealing with a recently divorced woman ready to spend her settlement on something flashy. He wasn't entirely wrong about the statement part. Let me show you our premium models. An hour later, I was the owner of a brand new BMW X7 M50i. Metallic black, premium leather interior, every option available. The sticker price was more than I'd made in some entire years as a teacher, but I paid cash without blinking. Would you like us to remove the dealer plates and temporary tags? Derek asked as we completed the paperwork. No, leave everything exactly as it is. I want it obvious this is a new purchase. Driving home in the BMW felt surreal. The engine was silent, the ride smooth as silk, and every surface I touched felt expensive. This wasn't transportation. It was a declaration. I spent the drive thinking about Vanessa's reaction when she saw it. Her mother, the woman with no ambition, rolling up in a vehicle that cost more than most people's annual salary. But the car was just the opening move. That evening, I sat down with my laptop and began researching real estate. Not to buy anything myself. My house was perfect for my needs, but to understand the market where Vanessa lived. Her luxury high-rise was one of several similar buildings in downtown Phoenix, catering to young professionals who wanted to live in the heart of the city. What I discovered was fascinating. The building was struggling financially, occupancy rates were down, and the management company was behind on several major maintenance projects. The building association was considering a special assessment that would hit all the unit owners with a significant bill. But more interesting than the building's problems was its ownership structure. Like many luxury developments, it had been financed through a complex arrangement involving multiple investors and holding companies. With some careful digging, I traced the ownership trail back to its source. The building was owned by Meridian Development Group, a real estate investment firm that specialized in high-end residential properties. According to their website, they were always looking for qualified investors to join their projects. I called them first thing the next morning. Meridian Development, this is Ashley. I'm interested in discussing investment opportunities with your firm. Wonderful. Can you tell me a bit about your investment background and the amount you're looking to deploy? I'm new to real estate investment, but I have substantial liquid assets available. I'm thinking somewhere in the $5 to $10 million range for the right opportunity. Another pause. Another transfer to someone higher up the food chain. 20 minutes later, I was speaking with Marcus Valdez, one of Meridian's founding partners. He had the smooth confidence of someone accustomed to dealing with serious money. Mrs. Crawford, Ashley mentioned you're interested in real estate investment. What draws you to our firm specifically? I've been researching downtown Phoenix properties and I'm impressed with your portfolio, particularly the Meridian Towers project. Ah, yes. That's one of our flagship properties. Beautiful building, excellent location. I understand there might be some opportunities for additional investment in that property. Valdez was quiet for a moment. May I ask what your connection to Meridian Towers is? Are you familiar with someone in the building? My daughter lives there, Unit 3207. I see. And you're interested in becoming an investor in the building where she lives? Among other investments, yes. I think downtown Phoenix has tremendous growth potential. We scheduled a meeting for the following week. Valdez would show me their full portfolio and discuss various investment levels. What he didn't know yet was that I wasn't just interested in becoming an investor in my daughter's building, I was interested in becoming the primary investor. The weekend passed quietly. I spent Saturday at the farmer's market, buying organic vegetables I'd never been able to afford before, chatting with vendors who'd known me for years. Nobody treated me differently because they had no idea my life had fundamentally changed. I was still just Patsy, the retired teacher who always bought too much zucchini and asked detailed questions about soil composition. But underneath the familiar routine, I was planning. Sunday evening, Vanessa called. "Hey Mom, how was your weekend?" Her tone was casual, friendly even. No acknowledgement of our difficult conversation on Thursday, no reference to the harsh words she'd spoken. It was as if she'd simply erased the entire interaction from her memory. "It was good, sweetheart. How are you feeling? You seemed stressed when I saw you." "Oh, that? Yeah, work stuff. It's mostly resolved now. Brandon and I talked too. We're gonna try couples counseling." "That's wonderful news. Yeah, I think it'll help. He's been under pressure too, you know? The markets have been volatile, and his firm is restructuring. But we're committed to working through it." I made appropriate supportive noises while marveling at how easily she dismissed the concerns that had seemed so overwhelming just days ago. Either she was an excellent actress, or she genuinely believed her problems were temporary inconveniences, rather than symptoms of deeper issues. "Mom, I was thinking maybe we could have lunch next week, if you're free." The invitation surprised me. "I'd like that." "Great, how about Wednesday? There's this new place I want to try. It's a bit pricey, but I think you'd enjoy the experience." A bit pricey. She wanted to take me somewhere expensive as a gesture of reconciliation, probably planning to pay for lunch as a way of showing her generosity. The irony was delicious. "Wednesday works perfectly. Should I meet you there?" "Actually, how about you pick me up? I'm having car trouble." Car trouble? Her precious BMW, the symbol of her success, was probably just due for routine maintenance. But in Vanessa's mind, any inconvenience with her vehicle constituted a crisis. "Of course. What time?" "Noon? And Mom? Thanks for being understanding about the other day. I know I was a little sharp. Work stress, you know?" A little sharp. That was how she characterized the conversation, where she'd called me mediocre and accused me of being jealous of her success. "I understand, sweetheart. I'll see you Wednesday." After she hung up, I sat in my living room, looking around at the familiar space. The worn furniture, the faded photographs, the books that lined every available wall. This was the life Vanessa saw as small, limited, unambitious. She had no idea she was looking at the home of a woman who could buy her apartment building on a whim. Wednesday, I decided, would be educational for both of us. I spent Monday and Tuesday making preparations. A trip to the salon for a real haircut and color, not the basic trim I usually got at the budget chain. A shopping expedition to Nordstrom, where I bought clothes that fit properly and flattered my figure. Nothing flashy or obviously expensive, but quality pieces that looked effortless and elegant. The transformation was subtle but significant. I looked like myself, but a version of myself who'd been properly cared for. The kind of woman who belonged in nice restaurants and luxury cars. Tuesday evening, I had dinner with Maria to show off my new look. "Holy shit, Patsy, you look 10 years younger." "Language, Maria. I'm serious, what did you do?" I explained about the salon, the shopping trip, the general upgrade to my appearance. Maria studied me across the table at our usual restaurant, a neighborhood Mexican place where we'd been having sister dinners for years. "This is about more than just looking good, isn't it?" "What do you mean?" "You're planning something. I can see it in your eyes. You have that look you used. To get when you were plotting revenge against the mean girls in high school. Maria knew me too well. I'm not plotting revenge. No? Then what would you call it? I considered the question. Education. Ah. Maria leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. And when does the first lesson begin? Tomorrow. I almost feel sorry for Vanessa. Don't. She's about to learn something valuable about making assumptions. Wednesday morning, I dressed carefully in one of my new outfits. Tailored black pants, a cashmere sweater in deep burgundy, and low heels that were comfortable enough for walking but expensive enough to be noticed. My jewelry was simple but real. The pearl earrings and necklace my husband had given me for our 20th anniversary, pieces I'd rarely worn because I'd been afraid of losing them. I looked successful. Quietly, understated successful. The kind of woman who didn't need to announce her wealth because it was simply part of who she was. The drive to Vanessa's building in my new BMW was sweet revenge in itself. The garage attendant did a double take when I pulled up, clearly recognizing me but surprised by the upgrade in vehicles. I tipped him $20, more than I'd ever tipped anyone in my life, and watched his face light up with surprise and gratitude. Vanessa was waiting in the lobby when I arrived, looking polished as always but with those same tired eyes I'd noticed before. She did a visible double take when she saw me. Mom? Wow, you look different. Thank you, sweetheart. You look lovely too. She was still staring. Did you do something to your hair? Just had it styled. Do you like it? It's very flattering. And that sweater is gorgeous. Is it new? I picked up a few things over the weekend. I decided it was time to invest in some quality pieces. The word invest hung in the air between us. Vanessa was still processing my appearance when we walked out to the street and she saw the BMW. Mom, whose car is this? Mine. Yours? She walked around the vehicle like she was examining evidence of a crime. What happened to your Honda? I traded it in. This seemed more practical for my needs. Practical? Her voice rose slightly. Mom, this car costs more than most people make in a year. Does it? I hadn't really thought about it in those terms. The lie came easily. I'd thought about little else since buying the car, but watching Vanessa's face as she tried to process this new information was worth every penny of the purchase price. How did you afford this? I had some investments that performed well. Investments? Mom, you're a retired teacher. What kind of investments? I smiled mysteriously and opened the passenger door for her. Shall we go to lunch? You can tell me about this restaurant you wanted to try. The drive to the restaurant was filled with Vanessa's increasingly frantic questions about my financial situation. I deflected most of them with vague references to good fortune and unexpected returns. By the time we arrived at the restaurant, an upscale steakhouse where entrees started at $50, she was practically vibrating with curiosity. Table for Crawford, I told the hostess. Right this way, Mrs. Crawford. Your usual table? Vanessa's head snapped toward me. Your usual table? The hostess, a young woman named Sarah who'd been working here since I'd started coming in last week, smiled warmly. Mrs. Crawford is one of our favorite guests. Always a pleasure to have you. I'd been here exactly 3 times since discovering my wealth, but I'd tipped well and treated the staff with genuine respect. Apparently, that was enough to earn VIP status. We were seated at a prime table by the window, with a view of the desert landscape that made the city feel like an oasis. Vanessa was looking around the restaurant with an expression I couldn't quite read. Mom, this place is expensive. Is it? You're the one who suggested it. I thought we'd split the bill. Don't be silly, lunch is my treat. The waiter appeared with menus and water glasses. Good afternoon, Mrs. Crawford. The usual wine to start? That would be lovely, thank you. Vanessa waited until he was out of earshot. The usual wine? Mom, how many times have you been here? A few times recently. I'm expanding my horizons. With what money? The question was blunt, almost rude. I could see the frustration building in her face as she tried to reconcile this new version of me with the woman she thought she knew. Vanessa, why are you so concerned about my finances? Because this doesn't make sense. Last week you were my normal mom, driving a 10-year-old Honda and shopping with coupons. Now you're driving a luxury car and ordering wine at restaurants that cost more than most people spend on groceries in a month. People change, sweetheart. Maybe I decided it was time to live a little. Live a little? Mom, you're acting like you won the lottery. The wine arrived, a beautiful Bordeaux that I'd learned to appreciate during my recent dining experiences. I took a sip and savored both the flavor and the moment. Maybe I did. Vanessa's fork clattered against her plate. What does that mean? It means good things sometimes happen to people who wait for them. Mom, please. Just tell me what's going on. Did Dad leave you money? Did you inherit something? Did you actually win the lottery? I looked at my daughter across the table. This beautiful, accomplished woman who'd spent the last week tearing down everything I'd sacrificed to build. The woman who'd called me mediocre and unambitious, who'd dismissed my entire life as a failure of imagination. Vanessa, does it really matter where the money came from? Yes, it matters. Because if you're in some kind of financial trouble, if you're taking out loans or credit cards to pay for all this, I need to know. I can't let you ruin your retirement because you're having some kind of midlife crisis. The irony was breathtaking. She thought I was the one in financial trouble. She thought this new lifestyle was some desperate attempt to prove myself, funded by debt and delusion. I appreciate your concern, I said carefully. But I can assure you that my financial situation is very stable. Then explain it to me. I don't owe you an explanation. The words came out sharper than I'd intended, but they were true. For my entire adult life, I'd explained myself to Vanessa, justified my choices, defended my decisions, apologized for my limitations. When had it become her right to interrogate me about every aspect of my life? You don't owe me an explanation? Her voice was rising, drawing glances from other diners. Mom, I'm your daughter. If something major has changed in your life, I should know about it. Should you? The way I should have known about your problems with Brandon? The way I should have known about your work stress? The way I should have known that you see me as a failed example of what not to do with your life? Vanessa's face flushed. That's not fair. Isn't it? Last week you told me my advice wasn't relevant to your life. You said I couldn't relate to your challenges because I'd never pushed myself beyond my comfort zone. You called me mediocre and unambitious. Each word came out measured, controlled. So why should my financial situation be any of your business? Because I care about you. Do you? Or do you care about maintaining the image of me that makes you feel better about yourself? The question hung between us like a challenge. Vanessa opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. For the first time in years, she seemed genuinely speechless. The waiter returned to take our orders. I selected the most expensive item on the menu, a dry-aged ribeye with truffle butter. Vanessa ordered a salad, her appetite apparently diminished by our conversation. Mom, she said when we were alone again, I think you're overreacting to what I said last week. Am I? Yes. I was stressed. I said some things I didn't mean. But that doesn't justify this. Whatever this is. What do you think this is? I think you're trying to prove something. I think you heard what I said about your life being small. And now you're trying to show me that you can be just as successful as I am. The assumption was so wrong, so backwards, that I almost laughed. She thought I was trying to measure up to her standards. She thought this was about earning her approval. Vanessa, what if I told you that I don't need to prove anything to you? Then I'd say you're lying. Why? Because everyone needs approval from the people they love. It's human nature. I studied my daughter's face, seeing the certainty there. She genuinely believed that my worth was tied to her opinion of me, that my happiness depended on her validation. What if you're wrong about human nature? I'm not wrong. What if you're wrong about me? She was quiet for a moment, considering. Then, Mom, I know you. I've known you my entire life. You're a good person, but you've never been ambitious. You've never taken big risks. You've never pushed for more than what was comfortable and safe. And that's what you think you're seeing now? Me pushing for more? Yes, I nodded slowly. Then you don't know me at all. The words landed like a physical blow. Vanessa's face went pale, and for a moment she looked like the little girl she'd once been, uncertain and afraid. What does that mean? It means you've spent so much time looking down on my choices that you never bothered to understand them. You've been so busy building your own life that you forgot to learn about mine. I know about your life. You were married to Dad, you taught school, you raised me. When Dad left, you worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. When I got into college, you took out loans to pay for my tuition. You've always been the responsible one, the practical one. And that's not the kind of person who suddenly starts buying luxury cars and eating at expensive restaurants. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the soft leather against my spine, inhaling the subtle scent of my new perfume. Everything about this moment felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. Vanessa, what if the person you think you know never existed? What? What if the woman who scraped and saved and sacrificed wasn't doing it because she had no choice? What if she was doing it because she chose to? Confusion flickered across her features. I don't understand. What if I could have lived differently all these years, but I chose not to because I thought it was better for you? Mom, that doesn't make any sense. Our food arrived, interrupting the conversation. The ribeye was perfectly cooked, tender and flavorful, probably the best steak I'd ever eaten. But I was too focused on Vanessa's face to fully appreciate it. Sweetheart, have you ever considered the possibility that your understanding of our family history might be incomplete? What are you trying to say? I'm trying to say that there are things about our financial situation that you've never known. Things I chose not to share because I thought it was better for you to believe we were struggling. What things? I took another bite of steak, chewing slowly, letting the silence stretch. Part of me wanted to tell her everything right now, to watch her face as the truth sank in. But that would be too easy, too quick. She needed to work for this revelation. Mom, what things? Did you know that your grandfather owned mining stock? Grandpa? No, I didn't know that. Did you know that your grandmother had a life insurance policy that was invested in growth funds for 30 years? No. Did you know that I've been managing investment portfolios since before you were born? Vanessa's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. You have? I have a degree in mathematics, Vanessa. With a minor in economics. I understand compound interest and market dynamics better than most people. But you taught kindergarten. Because I chose to. Because I wanted to shape young minds during their most formative years. Because I found meaning in that work. I paused, not because it was the only job I could get. I don't understand. I know you don't. That's exactly the problem. The rest of lunch passed in relative silence. Vanessa picked at her salad while I enjoyed my steak, occasionally asking questions that I answered vaguely or deflected entirely. By the time we finished, she looked more confused than I'd ever seen her. When the check came, I paid it without looking at the total, adding a generous tip that made our waiter beam with gratitude. The entire meal had cost more than Vanessa typically spent on groceries in a month, but I handled it like it was pocket change. Ready to go? I asked. Mom, I feel like we need to finish this conversation. Do we? I thought you said my life wasn't relevant to yours anymore. I didn't mean that. Didn't you? We walked to the car in silence. As I started the engine, Vanessa turned to face me. Mom, I'm sorry about what I said last week. I was stressed and upset, and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair. No, it wasn't. But I need you to help me understand what's happening here. This isn't just about money, is it? You're different. You're acting like a completely different person. I considered her words as I pulled out of the parking lot. Was I acting like a different person, or was I finally acting like myself? Vanessa, do you remember when you were little, and you asked me why I never bought myself nice things? Vaguely. I told you it was because we needed to save money for important things. Do you remember what you said? No. You said, "But Mommy, aren't you important too?" I could see the memory flickering in her eyes. I told you that taking care of you was more important than taking care of myself. Do you remember that? Yes. Well, sweetheart, You're all grown up now. You don't need me to take care of you anymore. I glanced at her as we stopped at a red light. So maybe it's time I started taking care of myself. By buying expensive cars and eating at fancy restaurants? By doing whatever makes me happy. And this makes you happy? I thought about the question. The car, the clothes, the restaurant, they were symbols, not sources of happiness. But the power they represented, the freedom they signified, the way they forced people to reconsider their assumptions about me, that was intoxicating. Yes, I said simply. It does. We drove the rest of the way to her building in silence. When I pulled up to the curb, Vanessa hesitated before getting out. Mom, I love you. I hope you know that. I love you too, sweetheart. Whatever's going on with you, whatever changes you're making, I just want you to be careful. I don't want to see you get hurt. I appreciate that. Will you call me this week, so we can talk more? Of course. She leaned over and kissed my cheek, then got out of the car. I watched her walk into the building, her posture straight but her steps uncertain. She was beginning to realize that something fundamental had shifted. But she didn't understand what or why. That was fine. Understanding would come. But first, she needed to see how much further this rabbit hole went. I drove home with the windows down, letting the desert air flow through the car. The afternoon sun was warm on my face, and for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. Not just content or comfortable, but energized by possibility. Tomorrow, I had a meeting with Marcus Valdez at Meridian Development. By next week, I might own a significant stake in my daughter's building. By next month, I might be in a position to make decisions that would directly impact her life. The thought should have felt like revenge, but it didn't. It felt like justice, or maybe just balance. Vanessa had spent years underestimating me, dismissing my intelligence, reducing my worth to the limitations she thought she saw. She'd built her entire sense of self-superiority on the foundation of my perceived failures. It was time to rearrange that foundation. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed my neighbor Mrs. Patterson working in her garden. She waved as I got out of the BMW, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of the new car. Afternoon, Patsy. Beautiful day, isn't it? Perfect day, Eleanor. How are the roses coming along? Oh, wonderful. Your advice about the fertilizer really made a difference. We chatted for a few minutes about gardening and the weather, the same comfortable conversation we'd had hundreds of times before. Eleanor treated me exactly the same as she always had, because to her, I was still just Patsy, the retired teacher who knew about soil composition and plant care. But as I walked into my house, I was smiling, because tomorrow I would start becoming someone else entirely, someone my daughter had never imagined could exist. The phone was ringing when I stepped inside. I checked the caller ID and saw Vanessa's name. Hello, sweetheart. Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation today. Oh, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to be honest with me. All right. Are you wealthy? The question hung in the air between us. I could hear the uncertainty in her voice, the way she'd phrased it like she couldn't quite believe she was asking. What would you consider wealthy, Vanessa? Mom, please, just answer the question. I walked to my kitchen window and looked out at the desert landscape, thinking about all the ways I could respond. I could tell her the truth right now, watch her world rearrange itself in real time. I could lie and keep her guessing. I could deflect and change the subject. Instead, I chose the option that would teach her the most. Vanessa, wealth isn't just about money. That's not an answer, isn't it? You've spent years telling me that my life was small and unambitious. You've defined success by material possessions and career achievements. So let me ask you, if I am wealthy, what does that say about everything you thought you knew? Silence stretched across the line. I'll talk to you soon, sweetheart. Mom, wait. I hung up before she could finish the sentence. Tomorrow, the real education would begin. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that only desert air could provide. I dressed with particular care, selecting a charcoal gray suit that I'd purchased specifically for today's meeting. The fabric was Italian wool, cut to perfection, and it transformed me into someone who belonged in boardrooms and investment discussions. Looking at myself in the mirror, I saw a woman who commanded respect. The Meridian Development offices occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming tower in Scottsdale's financial district. As the elevator carried me upward, I reviewed my strategy one final time. This wasn't just about investing money. It was about positioning myself where I could influence the circumstances of my daughter's life. Marcus Valdez was waiting in the reception area when I arrived, immaculate in his navy suit and Italian leather shoes. He had the kind of polished confidence that came from years of successful deals. But I noticed how his eyes assessed me differently than they had during our phone conversation. The woman standing before him looked like serious money. "Mrs. Crawford, wonderful to meet you in person. I have to say, when you mentioned your interest in real estate investment, I wasn't expecting someone with your level of sophistication." "Thank you, Mr. Valdez. I believe in dressing for the occasion." He led me through a maze of glass-walled offices, where young professionals hunched over multiple monitors, tracking market movements and analyzing property values. The energy was palpable, the kind of focused intensity that came from handling millions of dollars in transactions daily. "Welcome to our war room," Valdez said with a grin. "This is where we monitor all our properties and identify new opportunities." The conference room where we settled overlooked the Phoenix skyline, with my daughter's building visible in the distance. I could actually see the balcony of her apartment from where I sat, a detail that felt almost poetic. "I've prepared a comprehensive overview of our current portfolio," Valdez began, spreading documents across the polished table. "But before we dive into specifics, I'd like to understand your investment goals. Are you looking for steady income, capital appreciation, or something else?" "I'm interested in control," I said simply. His eyebrows rose slightly. "Control? I want to own things, Mr. Valdez. Not just profit from them, but actually control their operation and direction." That's refreshing. Most investors today are passive, looking for hands-off returns. But active ownership can be much more rewarding, both financially and personally. For the next hour, Valdez walked me through Meridian's properties: strip malls, office complexes, residential developments, and luxury apartment buildings. The numbers were staggering. Their total portfolio was valued at over $200 million, generating annual revenues in the tens of millions. "Now let's talk about Meridian Towers specifically," he said, pulling up detailed financials on his tablet. "It's one of our most prestigious properties, but I'll be honest with you. It's also been one of our most challenging." "How so?" "Occupancy rates have been declining over the past 18 months. We're sitting at about 75%, which is well below our target of 90%. The market for luxury rentals has softened, and we've had to deal with some unexpected maintenance issues." He showed me spreadsheets detailing the building's finances. Revenue was down, expenses were up, and they were facing a significant capital shortfall for necessary improvements. The building needed new elevators, updated HVAC systems, and renovations to common areas that were starting to show their age. What kind of investment would be required to turn this around? "We estimate about $8 million for the immediate improvements, plus another $2 million for marketing and lease incentives to boost occupancy. $10 million. A substantial sum by any measure, but well within my means." "And what would an investment of that size buy me?" Valdez leaned back in his chair, studying me carefully. "It would make you our majority partner in Meridian Towers. You'd have controlling interest in all operational decisions, including tenant policies, lease terms, building rules." "Absolutely. As majority owner, you'd have final say on anything related to the property." The implications were delicious. I would literally be my daughter's landlord, with the power to make decisions that directly affected her living situation. Not that I planned to abuse that power, but the symbolism was perfect. "What about existing leases? Would those remain in effect?" "All current leases would be honored, of course. But as they come up for renewal, the new ownership structure would be able to negotiate new terms." "I see. And when do most leases typically come up for renewal?" Valdez consulted his tablet. "We have a fairly even distribution throughout the year. About 20% of our leases renew each quarter." "Including Unit 3207? "Let me check." He scrolled through the data. "Ah yes, that's your daughter's unit. Actually, her lease comes up for renewal next month." "Perfect timing. Absolutely perfect." Mr. Valdez, I'm prepared to make the full investment today, $10 million for majority control of Meridian Towers. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Valdez's professional composure slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine surprise. Today? Mrs. Crawford, that's a very significant decision. Don't you want time to review everything with your financial advisors? I've already discussed it with my wealth management team. They're prepared to transfer the funds as soon as we have a signed agreement. Well, in that case, let me get our legal team involved immediately. We can have documentation prepared within a few hours. Excellent, but I have one additional request. Of course. I want this transaction to remain confidential for now. No press releases, no announcements to tenants. Just a quiet change in ownership structure. That's certainly possible. May I ask why? I smiled, thinking about Vanessa's confusion yesterday. Her growing suspicion that something fundamental had changed in my life. I prefer to let my actions speak louder than announcements. The legal process moved with impressive speed. Meridian's attorneys were clearly accustomed to handling large transactions quickly, and by 3 o'clock that afternoon, I was signing documents that made me the majority owner of a $30 million luxury apartment building. The wire transfer from my account was processed immediately. Harrison and Associates had been prepared for this move, having already verified the funds and prepared the necessary documentation. In the span of a few hours, I had become a major player in Phoenix real estate. Congratulations, Mrs. Crawford, Valdez said as we shook hands. You're now the owner of one of downtown Phoenix's premier residential properties. Thank you. When can I schedule a walkthrough of the building? How about tomorrow morning? I'll give you a comprehensive tour, introduce you to the building management team, and we can discuss immediate priorities. Perfect. And Mr. Valdez? Yes, I'd like to review all current leases, particularly any that are coming up for renewal in the next few months. I'll have those files prepared for you. As I left the Meridian offices, I felt a surge of power unlike anything I'd experienced before. I wasn't just wealthy now, I was influential. I controlled assets that affected people's lives in concrete ways. My daughter's life, specifically. The drive home gave me time to process what I'd accomplished. In less than a week, I'd gone from being dismissed as irrelevant to owning the building where my dismissive daughter lived. The transformation was so complete, it felt almost surreal. But this was just the beginning. That evening, I called Maria to share the news. You bought her building? Maria's voice was a mixture of awe and disbelief. I bought a controlling interest in her building. Holy shit, Patsy, that's some next-level power move. Language, Maria? Sorry, but seriously, you're now Vanessa's landlord? Effectively, yes. What are you going to do with that power? I'm going to be a very attentive property owner, make sure the building is well maintained, that tenants are happy, that lease renewals are handled fairly. And if a certain tenant has been disrespectful to important people, well, I suppose that would be a factor in determining what constitutes fair treatment. Maria was quiet for a moment. Patsy, are you sure about this? I mean, I get wanting to teach her a lesson, but this is her home we're talking about. Is it? Or is it just another symbol of success that she uses to measure her worth against mine? That's a good point. Besides, I'm not planning to throw her out on the street. I'm just going to make sure she understands that her comfortable life isn't as secure as she thinks it is. And how exactly do you plan to do that? I'd been thinking about this since leaving Valdez's office. Her lease comes up for renewal next month. I imagine there will be some adjustments to the terms. What kind of adjustments? Market rate pricing for starters. I suspect she's been getting some kind of promotional rate that's below market value. How much below? I'll find out tomorrow when I review all the lease agreements. But based on what I saw today, probably several $100s per month. That's significant. It's educational. Anything else? New building policies, stricter noise regulations, updated parking assignments, enhanced security measures that might affect her lifestyle. You're really going to put the screws to her, aren't you? I'm going to treat her exactly like any other tenant. No special favors, no family discounts, pure business. She's going to figure out it's you eventually. Eventually. But not immediately. And by the time she does, she'll have learned something valuable about respecting people whose circumstances she doesn't fully understand. After Maria and I hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my back patio, looking out at the desert sunset. The sky was painted in brilliant oranges and purples, the kind of natural beauty that money couldn't buy but that I'd never had time to fully appreciate when I was working multiple jobs and worrying about finances. This was what wealth really bought, I realized. Not just things, but time. Freedom. The ability to make choices based on what I wanted rather than what I could afford. My phone buzzed with a text message from Vanessa. "Mom, I can't stop thinking about our conversation yesterday. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "I'm having dinner with friends tonight. Maybe this weekend." It wasn't true, but I wasn't ready to talk to her yet. She was starting to suspect that something had changed. But she hadn't grasped the magnitude of that change. Tomorrow's building tour would give me more information about her situation. More leverage to work with. The next morning, I arrived at Meridian Towers at 8 sharp, dressed in another of my new business suits. Valdez was waiting in the lobby with the building manager, a efficient-looking woman named Patricia Chen. "Mrs. Crawford, I'd like you to meet Patricia. She's been managing Meridian Towers for the past 3 years. Patricia smiled warmly and extended her hand. "It's wonderful to meet you, Mrs. Crawford. Marcus has told me so much about your vision for the building." "Thank you, Patricia. I'm looking forward to learning about the day-to-day operations." The tour began in the basement, with the mechanical systems and storage areas. Patricia explained the recent problems with the HVAC system, the aging elevators, and the need for updated security systems. Everything Valdez had mentioned yesterday was confirmed by someone who dealt with these issues daily. "The tenants have been remarkably patient," Patricia said, as we examined the outdated elevator controls, "but we're starting to get more complaints, especially from the higher floor units." "Like Unit 3207? Patricia consulted her tablet. "Actually, yes. Ms. Ramirez has submitted several maintenance requests over the past few months. Elevator delays, inconsistent air conditioning, issues with the gym equipment." Ms. Ramirez. Vanessa had kept her father's name after the divorce. Another small rejection of our family identity that I'd never commented on but had always noticed. "How have those requests been handled?" "We've done what we can with our limited maintenance budget, but some of the issues require capital improvements that we haven't been able to afford." "That will be changing," I said firmly. "I want a complete list of all outstanding maintenance requests, prioritized by urgency and tenant impact." "Absolutely, I'll have that ready by this afternoon." We continued the tour through the common areas, the fitness center with its outdated equipment, the rooftop terrace that needed new furniture, the lobby that was elegant but showing its age. Every space had potential, but also clear signs of deferred maintenance. "What's the typical lease structure here?" I asked as we rode the elevator to the upper floors. "Most units are on 12-month leases, with rent increases tied to market rates. We typically see annual increases of 3 to 5%, depending on market conditions." "And what about Unit 3207 specifically?" Patricia pulled up the file on her tablet. "Ms. Ramirez has been here for 2 years. Her current rent is $2,800 per month, but that includes a promotional discount that was part of her initial lease package." "What would market rate be for that unit? For a unit of that size and location, with the current amenities?" "Probably $3,500, maybe $3,800 if we complete the planned improvements." $1,000 difference. Vanessa had been getting a substantial discount that she probably didn't even realize. When her lease came up for renewal next month, that discount would disappear. "I'd like to see the unit." "Of course. Let me just check if the tenant is home. She should be at work by now." Patricia gave me a curious look. "You know Ms. Ramirez? She's my daughter." The revelation clearly surprised Patricia, though she tried to hide it. "Oh, I had no idea. That's wonderful that you're investing in the building where your daughter lives. I believe in supporting the places that matter to my family." It was technically true, though not in the way Patricia would interpret it. The inspection of Vanessa's apartment was enlightening. It was even more impressive than I'd remembered, with panoramic city views and high-end finishes throughout. But I also noticed things I'd missed during my previous visit. A small leak stain on the ceiling in the bedroom, a kitchen faucet that dripped, bathroom tiles that were starting to show wear. "These maintenance issues should have been addressed," I said, making notes on my phone. "We've been waiting for budget approval for non-emergency repairs." Consider it approved. I want this unit brought up to perfect condition. Even though it's your daughter's place? Especially because it's my daughter's place. She should have the best possible living experience. Patricia smiled, clearly thinking I was being generous to my family. She didn't understand that I was preparing the unit for its market rate pricing. What about parking? I asked as we headed back to the elevator. Each unit comes with one assigned space in the garage. Ms. Ramirez has space number 47. And guest parking? Limited. We have about 20 visitor spaces that are first come, first served. That seems insufficient for a building this size. It's been a challenge. Some tenants have complained about not being able to have guests over because there's nowhere to park. Another point of leverage. If parking became even more restricted, social entertaining would become much more difficult. Back in the management office, Patricia provided me with comprehensive files on every aspect of the building's operation. Tenant profiles, lease agreements, maintenance schedules, financial reports. I spent an hour reviewing everything, paying particular attention to the details of Vanessa's lease. Her original agreement had indeed included significant promotional pricing, locked in for the first 2 years, with the promise of reasonable increases upon renewal. The language was vague enough to allow for substantial adjustments while remaining legally sound. Patricia, I want to schedule a meeting with all tenants whose leases are coming up for renewal in the next 3 months. All of them? That's unusual. We typically handle renewals individually. I prefer a more personal approach. I want to meet the people who live in my building, understand their needs and concerns. That's very thoughtful. I'll start scheduling appointments. Let's begin with Unit 3207, next Friday afternoon. I'll reach out to Ms. Ramirez today. The rest of the day was spent reviewing financial projections and planning the building improvements. I authorized immediate repairs to address safety concerns and comfort issues, but the major renovations would be phased in over the next 6 months. By 5 o'clock, I had a comprehensive understanding of my new investment and a clear plan for moving forward. More importantly, I had detailed knowledge of exactly how my daughter's living situation was about to change. That evening, Vanessa called while I was reviewing lease documents. Mom, I got the strangest call today. Oh? The management company for my building wants to schedule a meeting about my lease renewal. They said the new owner wants to meet personally with renewing tenants. That sounds very considerate. It's weird though, they've never done anything like that before. Usually they just send the renewal paperwork by email. Maybe the new owner has different standards. I guess. Do you know anything about real estate? Like, what would make someone buy an apartment building? The question was clearly fishing for information, probably related to her growing suspicions about my financial situation. Investment purposes, I would imagine. Real estate can be quite profitable if you know what you're doing. Right, but it takes a lot of money to buy something like that. I suppose it does. Mom, I have to ask you something directly. All right. Are you rich? There it was. The question she'd been dancing around for days, finally asked outright. Vanessa, what made you think to ask that? Everything. The car, the restaurant, the clothes, the way you've been acting. Either you won the lottery, or you've been hiding something from me my entire life. What if I told you it was neither? Then I'd say you're not being honest with me. I considered my options. I could continue deflecting, keep her guessing. I could tell her the truth and watch her world reorganize itself. Or I could give her just enough information to deepen her confusion. Vanessa, do you remember when you were applying to colleges, and you were worried about tuition costs? Yes. Do you remember what I told you? You said not to worry about it, that we'd figure it out. And we did, didn't we? You graduated without any student debt. Because you took out loans. Did I? Silence on the other end of the line. Mom, what are you saying? I'm saying that maybe you've made some assumptions about our family's financial situation that weren't entirely accurate. Are you telling me we weren't actually struggling when I was in college? I'm telling you that I made choices about how to manage our resources based on what I thought was best for you. What kind of choices? The kind that taught you the value of money and hard work, even if those lessons weren't entirely necessary from a financial standpoint. You're saying you could have afforded my tuition without loans? I'm saying that there are many ways to pay for things, and I chose the way that I thought would be most educational for you. Educational? Character building. I wanted you to understand the value of education, to appreciate the opportunity you were being given. So you made me think we were poor when we weren't? I made you think that money was something we had to be careful with, which was true regardless of how much we had. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. I feel like I don't know you at all. Maybe you don't. Why are you telling me this now? Because you're 28 years old, and it's time you understood that the world is more complicated than you think it is. Including my understanding of you, especially your understanding of me. Mom, I need to know. Are you wealthy? I looked around my modest living room, thinking about the $47 million in my investment accounts, the luxury car in my driveway, the apartment building I'd purchased that afternoon. Vanessa, I have everything I need, and more than I ever expected. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting tonight. This is crazy. My whole life, I thought we were just getting by. I thought you were sacrificing everything for me. I was sacrificing for you, just not the things you thought. What does that mean? It means that love and money are complicated, and children don't always need to understand the full complexity of their parents' choices. But I'm not a child anymore. No, you're not, which is why this conversation is happening now. So what happens next? Next, you learn to see me as someone other than the person you thought you knew. And then? Then we'll see if you like that person better. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea, thinking about the conversation. Vanessa was beginning to understand that her assumptions about me were wrong, but she didn't yet grasp how wrong they were. Next Friday's lease meeting would provide another piece of the puzzle. By the time she put all the pieces together, she would understand that the mother she'd dismissed as irrelevant was actually one of the most powerful people in her daily life. The irony was perfect. She'd spent years telling me I didn't understand her world, that my advice wasn't relevant to her sophisticated lifestyle. Soon, she'd discover that I didn't just understand her world, I owned it. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Chen. Ms. Ramirez confirmed for Friday at 2 p.m. Shall I prepare the standard renewal paperwork? I typed back. Prepare market rate documentation. No promotional pricing. Understood. The increase will be substantial. The market is what the market is. Of course. See you Friday. I set the phone aside and smiled. Friday was going to be very educational for my daughter. But tonight, I had other calls to make. Harrison and Associates had compiled a list of additional investment opportunities, and I was ready to expand my portfolio beyond real estate. If Vanessa thought discovering my wealth was shocking, wait until she learned what I planned to do with it. The game was just beginning. Friday morning arrived with an electric anticipation that I felt in every fiber of my being. I dressed with meticulous attention to detail, selecting a navy blue power suit that commanded respect without being ostentatious. Today wasn't about showing off wealth. It was about demonstrating authority. The woman looking back at me in the mirror was someone who owned things, controlled outcomes, shaped other people's realities. I arrived at Meridian Towers 30 minutes early, wanting to review final preparations with Patricia Chen before the afternoon's meeting. The building felt different now that I owned it. Every marble surface, every piece of artwork, every carefully maintained plant was mine. The responsibility was intoxicating. Good morning, Mrs. Crawford. Patricia greeted me in the management office. Everything is prepared for this afternoon's meeting. Excellent. Walk me through the documentation. She spread the lease renewal papers across her desk. The numbers told a stark story. Vanessa's current rent of $2,800 would jump to $3,700 under the new market rate agreement. An increase of $900 per month, or nearly $11,000 annually. Have you prepared the justification for the increase? Yes. Market analysis shows comparable units in similar buildings are renting for $3,500 to $4,200. We're actually being conservative at $3,700. And the other policy changes? Patricia handed me a supplementary document outlining new building policies that would take effect with lease renewals. Stricter guest parking restrictions, updated noise ordinances, enhanced security protocols that would require advance registration for all visitors, and elimination of the building's previous flexible payment policies. These changes will affect how tenants live in the building, I observed. Significantly. The guest parking restrictions alone will make entertaining much more difficult. Perfect. Vanessa's social life, which she valued so highly, would become substantially more complicated. One more thing, I said, pulling out a letter I drafted that morning. I want this included with the renewal documentation. Patricia read the letter, her eyebrows rising slightly. A personal note from ownership? I believe in direct communication with my tenants. The letter was carefully crafted to sound professional while delivering a specific message. Dear valued resident, as the new majority owner of Meridian Towers, I am committed to maintaining the highest standards of excellence in all aspects of our community. This commitment requires that all residents demonstrate respect for the property, the management team, and fellow tenants. Moving forward, lease renewals will be evaluated not only on financial considerations, but also on tenants' demonstrated appreciation for the privilege of living in our premier building. We believe that entitlement has no place in a community built on mutual respect and shared values. It was signed simply, P. Crawford, majority owner. It's quite direct, Patricia commented. I believe in clarity. At 2 o'clock sharp, I positioned myself in the conference room adjacent to Patricia's office, where I could observe the meeting through a one-way mirror. Vanessa arrived precisely on time, dressed in one of her expensive work outfits, carrying herself with the confident stride of someone who expected the world to accommodate her needs. Ms. Ramirez, thank you for coming, Patricia began as they settled at the conference table. I hope you've had a good week. It's been interesting, Vanessa replied, and I caught the underlying tension in her voice. This whole meeting is unusual. I've never had to discuss a lease renewal in person before. The new ownership has different standards. They prefer a more personal approach to tenant relations. Right, about that. Who exactly is the new owner? P. Crawford. A local investor who's very committed to upgrading the building and maintaining high standards. I watched Vanessa's face carefully, looking for any sign of recognition. The name Crawford meant nothing to her in this context. She'd been Vanessa Ramirez for so long that she'd apparently forgotten her mother's maiden name was Crawford. Okay, so let's talk about the renewal. I assume the rent will go up a little, but nothing too dramatic, right? Patricia slid the paperwork across the table. Let's review the new terms. I watched Vanessa's expression change as she read the first page. Confusion gave way to shock. Then shock transformed into anger. This can't be right. You're trying to raise my rent by $900 a month? The increase brings your rent in line with current market rates for comparable units. Market rates? I've been living here for 2 years. You can't just suddenly decide I'm paying too little. Your previous rent included promotional pricing that was always intended to be temporary. Nobody told me it was temporary. Patricia consulted her tablet. According to your original lease agreement, the promotional rate was subject to adjustment upon renewal. The language is quite clear. Vanessa grabbed the papers and read frantically. This is insane. Nearly $4,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment? A luxury one-bedroom apartment in downtown Phoenix's premier building. I can't afford this. You know I can't afford this. I'm sorry to hear that. The ownership group has decided that all units must be priced at market rate going forward. What ownership group? I thought you said it was one investor. P. Crawford represents a significant ownership stake, yes. I want to speak to this P. Crawford person directly. I can certainly pass along your concerns. No, I want a meeting. Today. Right now. Patricia glanced toward the mirror where I was watching. We discussed this possibility. I'm not sure that's possible on such short notice. Make it possible. This is my home we're talking about. I have rights. Of course. Let me see what I can arrange. Patricia excused herself and stepped into the adjoining room where I was waiting. She wants to meet with you directly. I heard. What do you think? She's clearly upset, but also determined. She's not going to accept this without a fight. I considered the options. I could continue hiding behind corporate anonymity, let Patricia handle the negotiation, and reveal my identity later when the lease drama reached its peak. Or I could step into that room right now and watch my daughter's world reorganize itself in real time. The second option was far more appealing. Tell her P. Crawford will be with her in just a moment. Patricia returned to the conference room. You're in luck. Mr. Crawford happens to be in the building and can spare a few minutes. Mr. Crawford? The owner. I took a deep breath, smoothed my suit jacket, and walked into the conference room. Vanessa was sitting with her back to the door, hunched over the lease documents, probably calculating whether she could somehow make the numbers work. Ms. Ramirez, I understand you wanted to discuss your lease renewal. She turned in her chair, and I watched the exact moment when recognition hit. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally, something that might have been fear. Mom? Hello, Vanessa. She stared at me for a long moment, her mouth slightly open as if she was seeing a ghost. You're P. Crawford? Patricia Crawford, yes, though you've known me as Patricia your entire life. You're the new owner of my building? Majority owner, yes. She looked at Patricia, then back at me, as if seeking confirmation that this wasn't some elaborate hallucination. This is impossible. What's impossible about it? You're a retired teacher. You live in Scottsdale in a house you've owned for 20 years. You drive a Honda and clip coupons. I drove a Honda until last week. The coupons were more about being practical than being poor. This doesn't make sense. Her voice was rising, drawing a concerned look from Patricia. Patricia, could you give us some privacy? I asked. Of course. I'll be in my office if you need anything. After Patricia left, Vanessa and I sat alone in the conference room, separated by more than just the width of the table. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken questions and shifting realities. How? She finally whispered. How what? How do you own this building? How can you afford to buy a $30 million property? $47 million, actually. The building was appraised at $47 million when I purchased it. Her face went pale. $47 million, give or take. Where did you get $47 million? I leaned back in my chair, enjoying the moment. Do you remember your grandfather's old mining stocks? Vaguely. Dad always said they were worthless. Your father said a lot of things that weren't entirely accurate. The mining stocks were worth $47 million? Not just the stocks. There were other investments. Your grandmother's life insurance policy, compound interest over 30 years. It accumulated. And you never told me? Why would I? The question seemed to stun her. Because I'm your daughter. Because families don't keep secrets like this. Don't they? You've been keeping secrets about your relationship problems, your work stress, your financial concerns. When did family transparency become so important to you? That's different. How? Because my problems are my problems. But this affects both of us. Does it? You've made it very clear that my life is separate from yours, that my circumstances aren't relevant to your sophisticated world. Vanessa's face flushed. I said that when I was upset. You said it when you were being honest. I didn't mean it. Didn't you? She was quiet for a moment, staring at the lease documents. So this is revenge? You're raising my rent to punish me for hurting your feelings? I'm raising your rent to market rate because that's what responsible property owners do. Come on, Mom. This is personal and we both know it. You're right. It is personal. I leaned forward, my voice remaining calm but my words carrying steel. It's personal because for 28 years, I've listened to you dismiss my intelligence, my capabilities, my understanding of the world. It's personal because you've spent years treating me like an embarrassment while living a lifestyle subsidized by my generosity. Subsidized? Did you think that promotional rent rate was an accident? Did you think the building management just randomly decided to give you a $900 monthly discount? Her eyes widened. You arranged that? I've been investing in this building since before you moved in. I've been subsidizing your lifestyle for years while listening to you lecture me about ambition and success. I had no idea. Of course you didn't. You were too busy looking down on me to notice that I was holding you up. Vanessa sat back in her chair, her confident posture crumbling. I don't understand any of this. You don't understand that your boring, unambitious mother is worth more than you'll earn in your entire lifetime? You don't understand that the woman you called mediocre owns the building you live in, probably makes more in investment returns each month than you make in salary, and has been quietly supporting your dreams while you publicly diminished hers? You're worth more than I'll earn in my lifetime? Substantially more. How much more? I considered whether to tell her the full truth. The $47 million was just what I'd discovered recently. Harrison and Associates had done a complete audit of my assets and found even more money tucked away in accounts I'd forgotten about, investments that had been automatically reinvesting for decades. Vanessa, I'm worth enough that I could buy your marketing firm and fire you just to make a point. The color drained from her face completely. You're joking. I don't joke about money. How much? More than enough. She stared at me for a long time, and I could see her mind working, trying to process this new reality. The car, the restaurant, the clothes. Not a midlife crisis, just a woman finally living according to her means. But why now? Why didn't you tell me before? Because you never asked. Because you were too busy explaining to me how successful you were and how limited I was to consider that you might have the relationship backwards. I never said you were limited. You said I was mediocre. You said I had no ambition. You said I'd settled for less because I lacked the courage to reach for more. I was angry. You were honest. And honestly, Vanessa, you were wrong about almost everything. She looked down at the lease documents again. So what happens now? Do I have to move out? That depends. On what? On whether you can afford the market rate rent. You know I can't. Then I guess you'll need to make some adjustments to your lifestyle. What kind of adjustments? The kind that people make when they discover their comfortable life was more fragile than they thought. Vanessa was quiet for several minutes, and I could see her running calculations in her head. Her salary, her expenses, the massive rent increase, the implications for her future. I could move to a cheaper place, she said finally. You could? But I love this apartment. I'm sure you do. And I've built a life here. My gym, my friends, my routine. All very important considerations. Mom, please, can't we work something out? Some kind of family discount. What kind of family discount did you offer me when you decided I was too embarrassing to include in your sophisticated life? That's not fair, isn't it? You wanted me to understand that my advice wasn't relevant to your world. You wanted me to accept that I couldn't relate to your level of pressure and success. Well, congratulations, sweetheart. Now you get to learn what real pressure feels like. This is cruel. This is business, something you told me I didn't understand. Vanessa's phone started buzzing insistently. She glanced at it, and her face tightened further. It's Brandon. You should probably take it. No, She looked at the phone again. Actually, yes. Excuse me for just a minute. She stepped into the hallway to take the call, leaving me alone with the lease documents. I could hear her voice through the door, rising in pitch as the conversation progressed. When she returned 5 minutes later, she looked even more shaken. Everything all right? I asked. Brandon broke up with me. I'm sorry to hear that. He said I've been too stressed lately, that I'm not fun anymore. He wants to date someone who brings, quote, positive energy to his life. The irony was perfect. Her relationship was collapsing at the exact moment she was discovering that her housing situation was unsustainable. The carefully constructed life she'd been so proud of was falling apart all at once. That must be very difficult. He's right, though. I have been stressed. Work is insane, money is tight, and now this. She gestured at the lease documents. I can't afford to live here anymore, and I can't afford to move either. First and last month's rent, security deposits, moving costs. I'm trapped. What about your parents? Can't they help? My parents? She looked confused for a moment. Oh, you mean Dad? I haven't talked to him in months. And you? She trailed off, realizing what she'd just said. What? I thought you couldn't help. I thought you didn't have any money. But now you know better. Now I know that everything I thought I knew was wrong. Not everything. You were right about one thing. What? You are trapped. The words hung in the air between us. Vanessa stared at me, and I could see her trying to process the magnitude of her situation. Her rent was increasing by nearly $11,000 a year. Her relationship had just ended. Her job was stressful, and apparently not paying enough to support her lifestyle. And the mother she'd been dismissing as irrelevant turned out to be the person controlling the most important aspects of her daily life. "What do you want from me?" she asked quietly. "What do I want?" "Yes, obviously, this isn't just about market rate rent. You're trying to teach me something. So what do you want me to learn?" I considered the question. What did I want from her? An apology would be nice, but apologies were easy and often meaningless. Respect would be better, but respect that came from fear rather than understanding wasn't worth much. "I want you to understand that the world is more complicated than you thought it was. I'm starting to get that. I want you to realize that your success isn't just about your intelligence and hard work. It's also about the foundation that other people built for you, like the subsidized rent, like the college education you got without debt, like the childhood where you never worried about money because I made sure you didn't have to, like the safety net that's always been there, even when you didn't know it existed. I never asked for any of that. No, you didn't, but you benefited from it while criticizing the person who provided it. I didn't know. You didn't ask. There's a difference." Vanessa looked down at her hands, which were trembling slightly. "So, what happens now?" "Now you make a choice." "What kind of choice?" "You can sign this lease at market rate and figure out how to afford it. You can find a cheaper place to live and adjust your lifestyle accordingly. Or you can acknowledge that your understanding of our relationship has been fundamentally flawed and work to change that." What would acknowledging that look like? It would look like respect. It would look like appreciation. It would look like treating me like someone whose opinions and experiences have value, instead of someone whose life represents failure. And if I do that, then we can discuss alternatives to market rate pricing. Like what? Like a family discount that reflects actual family behavior. How much of a discount? That depends on how convincing your change of attitude is. Vanessa was quiet for a long time, staring at the lease documents. I could see her weighing her options, calculating costs and benefits, trying to find a way forward that preserved her dignity while acknowledging her dependence. "I need time to think about this," she said finally. "How much time?" "A week?" "Your lease expires in 10 days. The renewal paperwork needs to be submitted by Monday." "That's only 3 days." "Yes, it is. That's not very much time to make such a big decision. Life rarely gives us as much time as we'd like for important decisions. This feels like blackmail. This feels like consequences. What's the difference? Blackmail is about taking something that doesn't belong to you. Consequences are about accepting responsibility for choices you've already made." Vanessa gathered up the lease documents and her purse. "I need to go." "Of course. I'll call you this weekend." "I'll be available." She stood up, then hesitated. "Mom?" "Yes?" "How long have you been planning this?" "I haven't been planning anything. I've been responding to circumstances as they developed. But you bought this building specifically because I live here. I bought this building because it was a good investment that happened to give me influence over something you care about. And you're going to use that influence to force me to treat you better. I'm going to use that influence to see if you're capable of treating me better when the power dynamic is different. That's manipulation. That's education." She walked toward the door, then turned back one more time. "What if I can't change? What if I am just a selfish person who only cares about people when I need something from them? Then you'll be looking for a new apartment. And if I can change, then you'll discover that having a wealthy mother who loves you is better than having a poor mother you can dismiss." "How much better?" I smiled for the first time since she'd entered the room. "Substantially better." After Vanessa left, I sat alone in the conference room for a while, processing what had just happened. The look on her face when she realized I owned her building, the way her voice had changed when she understood the magnitude of my wealth, the desperation that had crept in as she calculated her limited options. For the first time in our relationship, she needed me more than I needed her approval. Patricia knocked and entered the room. "How did it go?" "Exactly as expected." "Will she be renewing?" That remains to be seen. And if she doesn't? Then we'll have a very nice unit to show to prospective tenants. You're remarkably calm about this. I'm remarkably tired of being taken for granted. Patricia nodded. I understand. For what it's worth, I think you're handling this exactly right. Thank you. Will you be wanting to meet with the other renewing tenants? Not necessary. They can have standard renewals at market rate. And Ms. Ramirez? She has until Monday to decide whether she values her pride more than her apartment. That weekend passed slowly. I spent Saturday working in my garden, an activity that had always brought me peace. The physical work of tending plants, the quiet satisfaction of nurturing growth, the simple pleasure of being outdoors in the desert air. These were the things that had sustained me through decades of single motherhood and financial uncertainty. Now, with unlimited resources at my disposal, I could hire gardeners and landscapers to maintain my property. But I preferred to do the work myself. Wealth hadn't changed my appreciation for simple pleasures. It had just given me the freedom to enjoy them without worrying about money. Vanessa called Sunday evening. Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation. I'm sure you have. I need to ask you something. All right. If I apologize, if I acknowledge that I've been wrong about you, will you really give me a family discount on the rent? That depends on whether the apology is sincere. How will you know if it's sincere? The same way you know anything about another person's sincerity. By their actions over time. So even if I apologize, I still have to prove myself? Vanessa, do you think saying I'm sorry should be enough to erase years of dismissive behavior? No, but I think it should be enough to start over. Starting over isn't the same as pretending the past didn't happen. Then what do you want? I want you to understand that respect isn't something you give people when you need them. It's something you give people because they've earned it. And you think you've earned my respect? I think I've earned your respect many times over. The question is whether you're capable of recognizing that. I'm trying to. Are you, or are you trying to say whatever you think will get you the outcome you want? Silence on the other end of the line. Vanessa? I'm here, This is really hard. What's hard about it? Admitting that I've been wrong. Admitting that I've been awful to you. You haven't been awful. You've been young and self-centered and unaware of your limitations. Those are correctable problems. What if I can't correct them? Then you'll learn to live with the consequences. And if I can? Then you'll discover that having a mother who can afford to help you is better than having a mother you feel superior to. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crystal clarity that made Phoenix famous. I was in my garden when my phone rang at 8 sharp. Mom? Good morning, sweetheart. I'd like to come over and talk to you. In person. Of course. When would you like to come? Now, if that's all right. I'll put on coffee. She arrived 30 minutes later, driving her BMW but looking less polished than usual. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her makeup was minimal, and she was wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual designer clothes. You look different, I observed as I let her in. I feel different. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where she'd done homework as a child, where we'd planned her quinceañera, where I'd held her while she cried about her first heartbreak. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she began. I'm sure you have. About you, about me, about our relationship, about everything, really. And what have you concluded? That I've been an idiot? That's a start. I've been so focused on building my own life that I forgot to appreciate the person who made that life possible. Go on. I convinced myself that your life was small because I needed to believe that mine was big. I needed to feel like I was doing better than you because it validated my choices. Why did you need that validation? Because I was scared. Of what? Of turning out like you. The honesty of the statement hit like a physical blow. What does that mean? I was scared of being ordinary, of having a quiet life without recognition or prestige, of being someone people overlooked or dismissed. So you decided to overlook and dismiss me first. Yes. Why? Because if I could prove that your life was a failure, then my life couldn't be. And now? Now I realize that your life wasn't a failure. It was just different from what I wanted for myself. Different how? You built something real. You raised a child on your own. You created stability and security and love. You made sacrifices that let me chase dreams I might not have been able to afford otherwise. And I repaid that sacrifice by treating you like you were less than me. I studied my daughter's face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation, but what I saw was genuine remorse, the kind that came from real understanding, rather than strategic positioning. What do you want to do about that? I want to make it right. How? I don't know yet, but I want to try. Trying is a good start. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. How much money do you actually have? Why does that matter? Because I need to understand the scope of how wrong I've been. I considered the question. The complete financial picture was staggering, even to me. The mining stocks, the life insurance investments, the compound growth over decades, plus recent discoveries of accounts I'd forgotten about. Harrison and Associates had calculated my total net worth at just over $63 million. More than enough, I said simply. More than enough for what? More than enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life and still leave a substantial legacy. What kind of legacy? I'm establishing a charitable foundation focused on education. Supporting teachers, funding programs for underserved students, creating opportunities for children whose parents can't afford to give them advantages. That's beautiful. It feels right. Am I part of that legacy? That depends. On what? On whether you want to be. What would that look like? It would look like being part of something bigger than yourself. It would look like using advantages you've been given to help people who haven't been as fortunate. And if I don't want that, then you'll receive enough to pay off your student loans and make a down payment on a house, and the rest will go to people who understand the value of opportunity. How much is enough? $500,000. And how much is the rest? Substantially more. Vanessa was quiet for a long time, absorbing the implications. She was looking at the difference between financial security and generational wealth, and that difference depended entirely on her willingness to change. I want to be part of the foundation, she said finally. Why? Because I want to be the kind of person who deserves to be your daughter. You've always been my daughter, Vanessa. The question is whether you want to be my partner in something meaningful. I do. Then we have work to do. What kind of work? The kind that starts with you moving back into your apartment at a rent you can afford, and continues with you learning to see the world through eyes other than your own. What will my rent be? $2,500 a month. That's less than I'm paying now, because you're going to be working for the foundation. And foundation employees get housing subsidies. Working for the foundation? Unless you'd prefer to find another job. What would I be doing? Learning how to run a $60 million charitable organization. Learning how to evaluate grant applications, assess program effectiveness, measure social impact. Learning how to turn money into meaningful change. You want me to run your foundation? I want you to earn the right to run it. How do I do that? By proving that you understand the responsibility that comes with real power. And if I can't? Then you'll have a nice apartment at a reasonable rent and a trust fund that will keep you comfortable. But you won't have the opportunity to shape how $60 million gets used to change people's lives. That's a big responsibility. It's the biggest responsibility I can imagine. Why would you trust me with it? Because you're my daughter. And because I believe people can change when they understand what's at stake. What if I disappoint you? Then you'll have to live with that. But Vanessa? Yes? You've already disappointed me in every way that matters. The only direction from here is up. She flinched at the words, but didn't argue with them. How do I start? By signing your lease renewal at the subsidized rate and reporting to the foundation office next Monday morning. We have an office? We will by next Monday. And then? Then you learn what it means to have real power and real responsibility. Will you teach me? I'll give you the opportunity to learn. That's not the same thing. No, it's not. But it's what I'm offering. Vanessa reached across the table and took my hand. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for treating you like you were less than me. I'm sorry for dismissing your life. I'm sorry for being so selfish that I couldn't see how much you'd given me. I know you are. How do you know? Because you're here. Because you're willing to change. Because you're choosing to be part of something bigger than your own comfort. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. I always have. Even when I was awful? Especially when you were awful. That's what mothers do. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands across the kitchen table where so much of our relationship had been built. Outside, the desert sun was climbing toward its peak, painting everything in shades of gold and possibility. So what happens now? Vanessa asked. Now you sign your lease, pack up your designer clothes, and learn what it feels like to earn something instead of expecting it. And you? I continue being your mother. Just with better resources and clearer boundaries. I like the sound of that. Good. Because you're about to discover that having a wealthy mother who expects excellence is much more demanding than having a poor mother you can ignore. Bring it on, I smiled, squeezing her hand. Oh, sweetheart. You have no idea what you just signed up for. But as I looked at my daughter's face, seeing determination where there had once been entitlement, I knew she was ready for the challenge. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually she would grow into the responsibility I was offering her. And when she did, she would understand that the greatest wealth wasn't money in the bank. It was the power to change lives, including your own. The transformation was complete. My daughter had finally met her mother and discovered that the woman she thought she knew had never existed at all. The real Patricia Crawford was just getting started. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.